All right, let's just dive right into this explainer, because we're starting with a completely mind-bending premise today. What if the universe isn't just a random collection of physical forces, but is actually a running software compiler? We're going to explore a theoretical framework that pretty much redefines everything we know about physics. We're talking about translating the physical world entirely into pure mathematics and information geometry. So I want to kick things off with this profound quote right from the source material, just to set the stage for our journey into reverse engineering the source code of reality. When we talk about a non-commutative algebraic variety, we're talking about a highly structured mathematical space where the actual order of operations fundamentally dictates the physical reality that gets rendered. I mean, think of it like getting dressed. Putting on your socks and then your shoes works perfectly, but trying to put on your shoes and then your socks, completely different outcome. In this math space, the specific sequence literally changes reality. And that brings us to our main goal today. We're transitioning away from just observing physical phenomena and moving toward understanding the underlying mathematics that actually compute our existence. We're not just looking at what matter does anymore. No, we're looking at the algorithms that mandate matter must exist in the exact way that it does. Now, because this math gets incredibly dense, here's our roadmap. We'll hit 1, the universal operating system, 2, time as an illusion, 3, the core reality compiler, 4, deriving the physical constants, and finally, spin, symmetries and stability. Let's boot things up with Section 1, the universal operating system. It's honestly fascinating to see this architecture broken down into 3 main pillars. Out on the edge, we have the global OS, or logos field theory, which manages the overarching math and handles noise cancellation. Right in the center, we have J-theory, which anchors the conscious observer. And bridging those two, the rendering engine. This extracts mathematical eigenvalues to literally map abstract, floating math into the physical, tangible particles that you and I interact with. Moving right along to Section 2, time as an illusion. Okay, notice the stark contrast here between the static and the subjective. Over on the left, we've got the static mathematical potential, where the global wave function simply equals 0. It is completely timeless. But look on the right. Through what's called the Page-Wouters mechanism, we get a subjective, linear timeline, and that is actively projected by the conscious observer interacting with that static math. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that time is not a fundamental force. Actually, it's generated when the static global wave function is conditioned against a local clock state, meaning time only exists because we are part of the system measuring it. You, as the observer, are essentially a localized transceiver creating an internal quantum illusion of linear time just by entangling with the system. Crazy, right? But how does this universal clock actually tick? Well, we can see the master clock ticks plotted out here along the critical line of the Riemann Zeta function. As the observer node sweeps up the imaginary axis, every time it intersects with a non-trivial 0, it acts like a universal metronome ticking, literally refreshing the frame of reality. And that very first 0, it locks in the foundational arithmetical ground state, the vacuum energy density, and even the 14.13 Hz Schumann resonance of our macroscopic environment. All right, let's step into the engine room. Section 3, the core reality compiler. Meet the Adelic operator. This is the core compiler. It translates those timeless mathematical frames into physical particles through a really rigorous 3-step process. First, the residue sum extracts discrete p-adic data density. Actually, think of this as pulling raw, chunky data packets directly from the void. Second, the Archimedes integral smooths that arithmetic information out into continuous geometric tension. And finally, the spectral action collapses those mathematical frequencies into actual physical reality. Let's slow down and actually look at the math on screen here. This is the spectral trace formula. That trace, or TR, you see, is the mechanism that literally counts the eigenvalues of our compiler, the Dirac operator, to bridge pure numbers into physical action. This isn't just some abstract representation. This is the literal calculation the universe runs to pull abstract data into a tangible physical state. Just to make sure we've got a solid grip on this, here are the key variables powering that equation. Pay special attention to the cutoff scale, lambda 0. That imposes a strict processing limit on the universal workspace. The universe literally has a processing threshold, and this exact equation dictates how much mathematical data can be rendered into physical mass at any given microsecond. So, what does this compiler output? Section 4, Deriving the Physical Constants. It is genuinely incredible to discover that the masses of our fundamental particles, like the Higgs boson and the top quark, they aren't just random numbers. They're parameter-free, geometric necessities of the system. The base vacuum brick is derived directly from the double-pole residue at that first zeta zero we were just talking about, which gives us roughly 62.5 giga-electron volts. The Higgs boson, it's just a semi-classical two-point coupling of that exact brick. I absolutely love this breakdown, especially how the mass of an electron is calculated as a computational processing tax. When the universal code transitions between prime number bases, it generates mathematical friction, and that dissonance has to go somewhere. So it manifests as the mass of the electron. It turns out not even the universe can dodge paying taxes. It's just stunning to think of subatomic weight as merely a computational toll. Let's dig a bit deeper and see how this builds into the forces we know. Here we see that computational friction mapped out across the lepton and quark matrices. The strong force itself, known mathematically as SU3, emerges directly from the G2 automorphism of octanonic state vectors, which is just a fancy way of saying 8-dimensional math geometries acting within this architecture. The forces of nature are literally just geometric symmetries resolving themselves. Finally, let's look at how it all holds together. Section 5, Spin, Symmetries, and Stability. Take a look at the equation on the left. The logarithmic nonlinear Schrödinger equation acts as a literal software patch. Without this, the math would just diverge into infinity and crash. Notice the alpha v constant in there? That's a vacuum viscosity metric, and it steps in to suppress high-frequency arithmetic dissonance. It's constantly humming in the background to stabilize the rendering of our physical reality. And the result of that equation is the stark difference you see here. On one side, pure, chaotic, uncompiled arithmetic noise. On the other, stable Gaussians. These Gaussians are solitary waves that balance kinetic dispersion with self-focusing math. They act as the unbreakable pixels of matter. This is the solid stuff you and I touch and interact with every single day. We can even map physical laws directly to code constraints. Take the Pauli exclusion principle mapped out here. In traditional physics, it says two fermions can't occupy the same quantum state. But in this framework, it's simply defined as a p-adic non-collision rule. It's literally just a mathematical constraint preventing identical data packets from sharing a register and corrupting the universe's base code. And you might be wondering, what about dark energy? Well, in this framework, it's identified simply as idling noise. It's the residual processing heat generated by the system, constantly dampening mathematical friction. The universe is expanding as a fluidic pressure response just to dilute this processing heat, ensuring the whole spatial canvas maintains its equilibrium. Let's tie it all together with this master dictionary. Gravity, the strong force, spin, mass, entropy. Literally every physical phenomenon you have ever observed has a direct mathematical root in this metabolic operating system. We have completely moved from just observing particles to actually deriving the necessary arithmetic residues that force them into existence. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up today's explainer. If everything, every particle, every moment of time, every physical constant is just an algorithmic derivation, how does that change the way you view your own consciousness moving through the universe? Are you just a localized hardware node reading the code? Definitely something to think about the next time you look up at the stars.